Social commentary is a gigantic part of media and culture as a whole. From Van Gogh's painting The Potato Eaters to the shuffling monotony of the mall-going zombies in Dawn of the Dead, social commentary has been an integral piece of classic entertainment since time immemorial. I mean, you can even find people criticizing the Roman government through the means of pottery. At this point, it's an essential part of the human experience. This channel delves pretty deep into anime that has pointed criticism as its central tenet. And despite all the comments I get saying that Gundam isn't inherently political, you're dead wrong, by the way. I do find it incredibly interesting to see how creators tackle societal issues through art. Roujin Z has been suggested as a video topic for a few months, ever since we did that suggestion livestream last year. So I find it funny now that when I sit down and watch it, I'm hit with very similar themes as a game that I'm currently finishing up. I really like the Yakuza series, from Zero to Like a Dragon, and I even kinda like Dead Souls. It's a series that relishes in being equal parts insane and serious crime drama, with a hearty helping of commentary on the state of Japanese society thrown in. So it's pretty interesting that I'm getting into playing the series spin-off Judgment like years after its release, right around the same time that I finally decide to check out Roujin Z. Both pieces of media deal heavily with the topic of the elderly, a subject that's been a large topic of discussion for Japanese society for a really long time now, decades even. While Judgment deals with dementia and the growing struggle to care for a population of elderly patients that's beginning to crush the system, Roujin Z addresses the weight that people within the system feel, and how in turn the system begins to victimize those that rely upon it. Of course, Roujin Z ends up having a giant mecha hospital bed that wreaks havoc upon an entire city, but you gotta draw in a crowd somehow. I find it interesting to see this problem from a culture that's not my own, and while yeah, in America we definitely struggle with elder care, I've personally seen the effects that both care facilities and hospice can inflict upon both the family and the person being placed into the system. But in Japan, it's kind of on a whole different level. I mean, according to Japan Times circa 2019, the elderly account for nearly 30% of their population. So it's easy to understand why, even back in 1996, Japanese creatives were shedding light on the problem. Roujin Z was written by Katsuhiro Otomo, who's also known for his work on a little film, maybe you've heard of it, it's called Akira, and it was directed by Hiroyuki Kitakubo, a Sunrise alumni who worked on the original Mobile Suit Gundam way back in the 70s, and then went on to make a whole bunch of great shit like Golden Boy. With both a proven writer and director, Roujin Z just needs great animation, right? Well, good thing the animation was produced by A3P, the company that did the animation for incredibly impressive works like Robot Carnival and Project A-ko. With this powerhouse team behind it, it's no wonder that Roujin Z would go on to be brilliantly animated, action-packed, and even funny. The year is 1992, and the Ministry of Public Welfare is in crisis. Three key players that seek to solve this problem are the head of the ministry, Managawa, his underling who's been heading a secret project, Terada, and a mysterious man who's always wearing sunglasses named Hasegawa. The ministry has currently given out 7 million Life Alert-like medical crisis pendants, and the system is completely overwhelmed to the point that they have to utilize nursing students to handle the volume of calls. One particular nursing student named Haruko looks after an 87-year-old widower named Mr. Takazawa. Haruko is young and optimistic, a person who got into healthcare because she truly wanted to help people. So much so that while she admonishes Mr. Takazawa for using his emergency button simply because he wet the bed, she still helps him with care and without judgment. Right off the bat, I noticed how great this movie is with its attention to detail. As Haruko takes care of Takezawa, she sees an ambulance trying to squeeze through the narrow alleyway outside, and I just love how the vehicle struggles to get through the tight street. Little things like this really highlight the care that the animators put into their work, and the world that they created is one that looks lived in and worn. Haruko apologizes for the flagrant usage of the crisis button as the ambulance pulls up to the house and Terada from the ministry enters. To her surprise, Terada tells her that Mr. Takezawa has been chosen as a test subject, that his family gave permission, and takes him away without a second thought. The next day, we see Haruko at a nursing school and get to meet her group of friends. Most of them don't play a huge role in the story, and as such, I don't even think their names are said, except Maeda, who becomes important later. They learn that Takezawa is the test subject of a huge medical experiment, and Haruko rushes off to attend the press conference. It's here that Terada shows off his brand new piece of medical equipment that he hopes will solve the nation's elderly problem. The Z001 robotic hospital bed is unveiled as a universal piece of equipment that will take care of all the needs of your average octogenarian. And when I say it takes care of all their needs, I mean all their needs. The thing's got a poop vacuum on it. This scene right here is where I realized, oh, okay, the social commentary in this movie isn't exactly hidden, as the Z001 strips and bathes Takezawa in front of a crowd and flashing cameras. Commentary certainly doesn't have to be subtle to be effective. Judgment, which I talked about earlier, certainly finds itself in the same boat. Where the Yakuza spin-off looks directly into the camera and tells you, hey, dementia is a real problem and we need to do something about it, Roujin Z is heavily invested in the dignity and respect that the elderly receive. It's pointed out later that while Terada has the permission of Takezawa's family, no one ever asks the elder what he wants. Besides, the only person who really seems to care for Takezawa is Haruko. We never see or even hear from his family. So what, is power of attorney all that matters when turning over someone's life to a program or facility? Honestly, yeah, and Roujin Z isn't shy about making you think about how it's pretty messed up to just shuffle off the oldest member of your family to some care facility, especially with how this movie portrays some people's attitudes towards the elderly. Takezawa is seen as more of an object by almost everyone, and it's hard to come to terms with the fact that your value is sometimes tied to your ability to keep up and contribute in society, which leads to a lot of older people to be seen as useless. At least on a base level of care, the Z001 is truly impressive. The users wouldn't even have to worry about paying for the power supply, as it's equipped with a completely safe nuclear oven. And don't you worry about a pesky radiation leak, because it's equipped with a super sensor to shut the whole unit down if there were ever any problems. I mean, they don't say that it requires encasing the whole unit in concrete, patient be damned, but you know, a prototype is a prototype. Also, I have to mention that the machine is touted to do everything for him, including having a robotic arm that moves his jaw to chew, and attachments for the arms and legs to exercise him. And all this does not seem to make Takezawa happy. At least his entertainment screen is made by Sony. In fact, pretty much every piece of computer tech that is shown on screen is Sony brand. Kinda reminds me of the late 2000s where every character in every movie owned a Sony Vaio laptop. Later that night, Haruko and her friends are at the hospital when she's brought to her work PC to see her name just like scrolling all over the screen. Things get progressively weirder as all the screens in the room start displaying "Help me, Haruko" over and over again. She believes this to be a message from Takezawa somehow, so the group sneaks over to the facility where he's being kept. The old man seems to be unconscious when they arrive, and the students realize the internal workings of the bed are way more complicated than any other computer that they've ever seen. Terada catches them messing with it and tries to explain the message away as a software glitch, saying that he and Hasegawa will correct it. His nice guy act doesn't last for long though, as when Takezawa cries out for help and Haruko rushes to his side, Terada straight up punches her in the face, and he tells her that removing Takezawa from the Z001 would kill him, as there are probes and monitors wired into his nervous system. As Terada struggles with the unruly group and Hasegawa attempts to call the police, the bed starts to move on its own and runs down Terada on its way out the door. We see another one of the Z001's features as it transforms to fit through the elevator door. They actually make it all the way back to Takezawa's house before the police show up. Despite the bed going totally nuts and starting to break through the apartment's ceiling, Mr. Shades here is able to climb it and turn it off. All the students get off with a slap on the wrist, which seems pretty weird until you realize that not everything is as it seems to be, and keeping all this under wraps is in the best interest of everyone involved. At least everyone on the governmental side of things, as we see Terada get chewed out by Minister Minagawa. It would seem that the Ministry of Public Welfare knows basically nothing about the capabilities of the Z001. They had no idea it would transform like that, and Minagawa is furious that they would rely on technology for patient care when they don't even know how it works. Finally, Hasegawa makes a quick phone call to an unseen party, handing the phone to the minister, who quickly changes his tone. While the audience remains unaware of who Hasegawa could have contacted, it remains fairly obvious that the Nishibasha Corporation is more than it seems. Terada does seem to trust him and take him at his word though, so the project continues. Haruko resumes her work at the hospital as a student nurse, although now she's confined to working in ward only. She puts off going out with her friends to care for the patients, and we learn that while Haruko was in high school, she was gifted a room in her house just for studying. But this boon to her education was bittersweet, as the room once belonged to her grandmother. We learn that Haruko's grandmother was placed in a care home where she passed away alone, and this event really colored Haruko's view on the role that society has in taking care of the elderly. While making her rounds, she comes across a group of, elderly hackers in the geriatric ward who are casually hacking American companies for funsies. I kind of love these old bastards. They don't even get named in the movie, which is downright criminal. But old Krillin here is so happy he found evidence of tax evasion that he literally pops a boner. Haruko comes up with the idea to ask the hackers to contact the Z001's computer in order to check on Takezawa, and they end up showing the PC a photo of Takezawa's wife when their messages get no response. Somehow the hackers are able to use the computer to reconstruct her voice. It doesn't really matter how, honestly. In 10 minutes, you won't even remember that this happened. Haruko uses the voice of Takezawa's deceased wife and asks if he's in pain. He responds by pleading for help, and while the two have their exchange, the hackers study the layout of the Z001's PC. They discover that the computer's core is a top-of-the-line biochip, made of living matter that has only been known to be completed by the American military. Despite the risks, the hackers promise to help Haruko, and I think it's great that this group of elderly men are probably the most helpful characters in the entire movie. Honestly, they can probably only carry out their hacking activities because no one pays any attention to them, shedding further light on the issue of society just ostracizing the elderly. And not to mention that the nurses and medical system are completely overworked. Over the course of the night, the hackers are able to break into the Z001's PC, causing it to transform into this bipedal walking mode. Terada and Hasegawa arrive at the hospital in a panic to find that the bed is busting through the hospital wall and eventually makes its way outside. Takezawa finally looks at least a little happy as the bed busts through a pachinko parlor. And if you don't know what pachinko is, it's that thing that Castlevania turned into. The biochip inside the Z001 begins to take on a personality based upon Takezawa's memories of his wife, and the hackers are shocked to find that the computer is talking to him without their input. Terada busts into the geriatric ward and takes the discs from the elderly hackers. The AI asks Takezawa where he would like to go, and he's finally able to make a decision for himself, wanting to return to the beach where he and his family had fond memories. By the time the local police confront the rogue hospital bed inside of the local mall, it's begun to absorb other technology into itself. And it doesn't stop at streetlights and cash registers, as it easily eats up a couple of bulldozers that the police thought could box it in. When Terada sees that Haruko has arrived on the scene to try and help Mr. Takezawa, he tries to have her arrested, but we see that the AI inside the Z001 won't let that happen. Once it speeds off though, she's fair game for the cops. Luckily Maeda is head over heels for her, to the point where he crashes through the crowd to free her. Haruko spots Terada boarding a helicopter, and she climbs aboard. I love how she just asks him to scoot over and takes a seat for a second before he realizes it. This movie really excels in its animation when it's showing reactions. The facial expression and body language on display makes it so easy to get emotion across. It really is a joy to watch. The helicopter chases the bed across the city. It even uses a monorail track and crushes some of the passenger cars. It's here that Hasegawa spills the beans to Terada, telling him that while his company did plan on selling to the medical industry, their main goal was researching military usage for the 6th-gen computer. The chase gets even crazier when Terada falls out of the helicopter, only being saved by the Z001. At this point, Hasegawa becomes the true antagonist of the story, as Terada tries to explain to the PC that patients need love and care from flesh and blood humans. For what it's worth, Terada does actually seem to care deeply about both the elderly patients this would affect and the problem facing his nation. Overall, he's actually a pretty good guy, and it's his love for his work that caused him not to question where Hasegawa's funding was really coming from. The road to hell is truly paved with good intentions, after all. To Terada's surprise, the PC agrees to return Takezawa to the ministry, but only if they let it take him to Yui Beach first. Despite the agreement, Hasegawa has other plans, as he unveils a combat-ready model of the Z001 called the Alpha, a quadrupedal mech that absolutely reminds me of something from Ghost in the Shell. The Alpha blocks a tunnel through the mountains, the only way forward for the Takezawas. After a brief battle between the two robots, one representing death and one representing life, I guess, the Z001 smashes the Alpha with a car and speeds off into the tunnel. While Haruko and Terada believe that they're in the clear, their hopes are dashed as the Alpha reappears, but this time it has the helicopter incorporated into its body. During the fight, the Alpha gets an electric shock, which severs the link its PC has with its military handlers. This causes it to go absolutely berserk and start absorbing everything around it. The Mrs. Takezawa AI realizes that it can't go on and releases Mr. Takezawa from the core, telling Haruko to take care of him. Luckily, Maeda comes in clutch again and shows up in the tunnel with a stolen ambulance. Wow, dude, I've been down bad before, but I haven't ever stolen an emergency vehicle before. Anyway, Terada takes the old man into the back of the ambulance, and they speed off to follow the Berserk Alpha. They make it out of the tunnel to find themselves at Yui Beach, and in a final confrontation with the rampaging robot. This is where things start getting really crazy, and knowing that the production team had experience working on Akira isn't surprising. I mean, look at this thing. It starts expanding and absorbing everything around it, becoming an enormous mass of writhing steel. As an aside, this really reminds me of the Trapper Keeper episode of South Park from like the year 2000. It's almost the exact same type of situation in that episode, which is obviously inspired by media like Akira and The Blob, and of course, Rosie O'Donnell. The hackers contact Haruko through the Z001 and tell her that the only way to stop the Alpha is by destroying its organic brain. She grabs an oxygen tank, and with Terada and Takezawa still trapped in the ambulance that's getting slowly crushed, she begins to climb the mass of tangled machinery. Man, this scene is so well animated too. Just watch how much thought that they put into Haruko's movements as she runs and climbs. The way they made her legs move so intricately is really impressive and lifelike. And like before with the alleyway outside Takezawa's house, the attention to detail in the backgrounds is just astounding and super awesome. Haruko makes her way to the robot's brain and stabs it with the oxygen tank, and then in a final move, the AI from the Z001 shows up and ignites the tank with this little R2-D2 style lighter finger. On the beach, Takazawa sits next to the bio-PC core and enjoys a last moment with his wife, before the computer ultimately powers down. Despite the adrenaline-fueled second half of Roujin Z, the ending actually becomes quite somber. Takazawa has made it back to Yui Beach one last time, a place that he treasures dearly. Now that he's fulfilled that goal, he seems to have found some sort of peace. At the hospital, we find that the government has swept the entire incident under the rug, blaming the damage on a speeding ambulance. Must have been a big ambulance. Haruko continues to care for Mr. Takazawa, and he continues to say his wife will return for him soon. I was totally ready for this to be a bittersweet ending, with Haruko learning that caring for elderly patients means having to learn to let go, and to know when it's time to allow a person to pass with dignity. But I gotta say, this movie got me, because Takazawa doesn't pass away and rejoin his wife. She actually shows back up as a huge robot Buddha statue. Yeah, it turns out that the bio-PC just took some time to regrow, and now it's back to spend some time with its husband. The whole movie ends on this upbeat note, as Haruko and her friends all freak out at the return of the sentient giant robot. Roujin Z was certainly an entertaining and pretty wild experience. The movie is filled with immaculate attention to detail and beautiful artwork. The action is fast-paced and tense, with its 90-minute runtime brimming with creativity. Perhaps most importantly, you can really feel the creator's voice in this film. Respect for elderly patients and forward thinking to the future of their society was obviously a big issue for the writing staff of Roujin Z. And I think this goes to prove that art is always at its best when it's trying to say something. And the nice thing is, Roujin Z doesn't really beat its audience over the head with a heavy-handed moral. If you want to watch this movie as just some fast-paced mecha chaos, you totally can. But it does provide a more interesting experience if you feel like digging deeper. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. I'm really happy that Roujin Z was suggested as a movie to review, and I really gotta hand it to my community and say they're pretty good at recommending stuff that's genuinely interesting. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and a sub if you haven't, as it really does help the channel, and I hope you all have a great day. Hey there, and welcome to the end card for the Roujin Z video. First of all, let me start off by thanking the awesome channel members that we have. They're up on the screen. There are 8 of them now. They're multiplying. So now on the main channel homepage, we can have a channel members section, which I already put up. So cool. Thank you to AKA Batosai for the recent channel membership, getting us to 8. Cool. And then of course, thank you very much to D-Mells, Danky Stank, Swanky Mag, Kanto 20, Alsturza, Video Game Player 75, Brian Sanchez, and Lord Kagai as well for being members that have stuck around for like 6 months. You guys are awesome. I hope you really enjoyed this video. It was really interesting, and it's so weird how it lined up to work with me playing through Judgment and them kind of both having very similar themes with elderly. And of course, you know, it's always good to watch some media that has a deeper meaning. And I think on this channel, that's almost every time, except for maybe G Gundam. that one was just fun. And maybe Gundam Seed Destiny maybe didn't have a deeper hidden meaning, but otherwise we've been doing pretty good. Anyway, next up is something that people have been asking for a while, Vodums, which is awesome, and everyone should watch. I am pretty far in that video. I don't know if it will be exactly 1 week between this and that one. It might be a little bit longer because that video is probably going to be a bit longer than this one, so keep an eye out for that. Also, Even though I took this week off of it to get some things situated, check out the gaming channel, which you can find at the very bottom of the homepage here on my YouTube page. It's basically just a Let's Play channel. If you like a bunch of old games, then go check that out. I try to upload every day, except for this past week. It's just a fun time, so enjoy that if you want. Otherwise, thank you very much for stopping by, watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you very soon.